Welcome to Integrity and Joy. I'm Steve Walker. This is episode 18 of Integrity and Joy, Transformation in 3 Acts, Integrity Through Every Phase. So welcome to Integrity and Joy. I am Steve Walker, former U.S. diplomat, activist, educator, and now life coach, meditation teacher, and, of course, podcaster. Thanks for joining. I hope you got a chance to listen to last week's episode with Jillian Hervey, the front woman of Lion Babe. I loved having that conversation with her, especially having known her for so long, since she was in high school. And but it's just on so many levels, like the opportunity to kind of get behind the scenes in the music industry and learn about how, a relatively, well-known act gets started and evolves and navigates the industry. And I thought that was really powerful. And just on her personal life, also a great story. And she's so self-reflective. So if you haven't checked that out yet, please do. And I hope you're following the podcast in general, wherever you get your podcast. And if you haven't yet, please leave a rating and review after this episode. We'd love to get as many 5-star ratings as we can so we can get it in front of more people who could benefit or would enjoy listening. So please help us do that. We'd really appreciate it. Today's episode is a solo one, and I'm going to be talking about something that I help people with a lot in my life coaching practice, and that's dealing with personal transformation and major changes, transitions in life. And I thought, I should talk about it here because I think it'll resonate with a lot of people. We all go through, multiple transitions in our lives, and hopefully learn how to have the ability to undergo personal transformation, not just when things are happening to us, but by choice, right? On our terms, the timing by our choice. And that's a lot of what I do. I refer to myself as a transformational life coach because I'm trying with many of my clients to help them create and navigate transformational change in their lives, personally, professionally, you name it. And so I thought this would be a great topic for us today. And in addition, we deal with our own personal transformations and transitions, but we also deal with those that affect our families, our companies or organizations that we work for, our communities, and our country as a whole. And we're certainly going through right now what is a pretty significant, it feels like, transition pretty quickly. And I'm not going to get into that in any real detail today. But I want to acknowledge up front that no matter your political persuasion, this is a transformational time, it feels like, for the country and for the world because of the foreign policies that are being enacted. And it's important to recognize that and to realize that you're in the middle of this transition or transformation, perhaps. And in this case, where you have maybe limited influence or control, and you have to figure out how much and how you want to exercise that, but that it's real and that it can cause stress and strain and anxiety and uncertainty, no matter what you feel about the actual changes that are going on. And hopefully, no matter what's going on around you, you're going to realize that, there are good things and bad things, in any change or transition. And that's true in our personal lives as well. And so that's part of what I want to talk about is how to navigate that and do it in a way that's more conscious, that's more self-aware and intentional, and that has integrity, right? That allows you to really get in touch with the core of who you are and what you believe in, and to navigate the change, the transition, the transformation that in a way that feels like it has integrity for you, right? So that's what I'm hoping to do today. So I am a bit of an expert at transitions and transformation and change. I've moved 21 times in my life. That's right, 21 times, including a bunch as a kid. I've had four careers, right? Four different careers. Um, I've been married and divorced twice, and I've had other relationships that started and ended, obviously. And I've, had kids and then dealt with their, growing up and going off to college and the empty nest that comes with that. So there's been a lot, and there have been other ones. A lot of change, and it got to the point where I realized, I think it was at the beginning of COVID when we went to kind of that lockdown-ish phase, and at the school that I was working at, we went to remote learning. And initially, I had a couple of hours. I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like so much uncertainty, and I was trying to sell my house, and I like the first day of lockdown, I accepted an offer on my house, and I'm like, "How is this all going to happen?" I mean, so many things were in flux and uncertain, and but then I very quickly reminded myself, like, this is my comfort zone. Like I've been through so much change and transitions and transformations in my life that that significant change uh, in my life, even crises, almost feels like a comfort zone, right? It's like I've been here before. I know how it goes. I know how to manage it. Not that it isn't messy at times, for sure. When I quit the State Department over Bosnia, that was a big darn deal, and it involved initially a lot of media attention, which I wasn't used to and felt really insecure about, and financially and career wise, and my identity had been so tied up in being a diplomat, a foreign service officer. So, there was a lot going on, and had just gotten married like a year earlier. It was a lot. It was a lot, and for a while, I had no idea what I was going to do next. I mean, really struggled with it for months and months before the activism role kind of was thrown into my lap, in a way, and so, but in the meantime, like it was really really challenging. So I've been there. I get it. And one of the things that I learned is that is that we often struggle with these transitions, these transformations in our lives, because we don't really understand what's going on. That we just think like there's change, right? And we just have to deal with the change. But there's actually three phases to every transition, right? Or transformation. And I'll talk in a minute about what I mean by those. Um, there's something ending, then there's a limbo in between, right? Where you may not be quite sure what's going to start, right? Next, or where you're going to go, or what's going to be new. Um, and you may need to figure that out during that limbo time. And then there's a beginning. Something new starts, a new phase, a new experience, a new job, a new relationship, whatever. And so, and each of those can and probably needs to serve a purpose that will help you manage the change, manage the transformation in a healthy way that has integrity and feels like it's aligned with your core values and who you are and who you're trying to become. So, what do I mean when I'm using these words almost interchangeably? Change, transition, transformation. They're a little bit different. I mean, they're obviously related. Um, Change is really about like your situation changing, right? The circumstances change, right? It's not about you inside. It's a change in your circumstances in life, personally or professionally. So change often is happening to you. You're not in charge of it. You may be, but that's probably going to get us more into a more specific type of change, which is a transition or a transformation. But change is kind of writ large. It's a change in your circumstances usually, right? Um, and then transition is, you're going from one phase of your life or one set of circumstances to another, right? So, and it's about your process of going through it. It's not about so much the circumstances that are changing, right? But it's about your transition. What does this mean for you? What does this change mean for you? What are you going from and to? And getting clarity about that, right? And then transformation is more about self empowerment. It's about either taking advantage of a change in circumstances or creating intentionally change within yourself that is transforming you in a really meaningful way. So, in some ways, like transition is about you're moving from one set of circumstances to another, right? So, within a change that's happening to you, probably. And then transformation is saying, I'm going to harness this opportunity, this change that is forcing me to undergo some kind of transition here. Or I'm going to create it myself. I'm going to kind of initiate the change. I'm going to create it so that I can go through this process of transition in a way that is actually transformational. It's bigger. It feels more foundational. It feels like something major in terms of who I am or how I am presenting myself to the world, how I am interacting with the world is changing in a significant way. And that can be exciting, right? Because we tend to resist change, right? Most of us resist change. It's part of our, kind of primitive programming to resist change because when we were, cavemen and women, there was so much danger around us that what was familiar was safe, right? For the most part, like you knew that the people that you knew were people you could trust, that the berries that you knew wouldn't kill you, right? So we tend to have this instinct to crave what's familiar, to resist change, because change creates uncertainty and risk. And yet, change is inevitable. It's constant. Everything is temporary, right? Everything is temporary. Our lives are temporary. Our relationships, right? People come and go, right? Jobs, right? The way we see ourselves and the world around us, right? Our circumstances, all of it, it's changing constantly. So, to quote my favorite TV, series, Star Trek, resistance is futile, right? Resisting change. Sorry, it's happening all around you all the time and within you all the time, right? So, but we resist it. We do, right? To different degrees, each of us. We're really afraid of the unknown often. It causes some of us tremendous stress and anxiety. In addition, we tend to resist change because we don't know how to deal with or even realize we need to deal with the grieving that comes with something ending, right? We're not aware often of these three stages to, transitions, change. And so, particularly because, if we don't understand that, like, there can be change, the change can happen almost instantaneously in our circumstances. But our transition can take time, right? We sometimes take time to adapt. So we're not aware that this is all going on. So as a result, we're afraid of or don't want to do the grieving, right? We don't want to let go to what's ending or maybe what has already ended. And so we're resisting, right? So that's making it difficult for us to move forward, right? We resist the change even though it's happening or has already happened. And then sometimes we feel either within ourselves or from people around us or society as a whole that we have to kind of hurry up and move on, right? You even hear this when grieving, when someone loses a loved one, right? That there's an expectation almost of like, are you ready to move on? You done? Don't you need to move on, right? And yet everybody grieves differently and everybody grieves at their own pace. And everybody goes through change at their own pace. The limbo period that is so important and yet probably for some people the most uncomfortable because it's like filled with uncertainty, right? That 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 phase is so important and yet we sometimes feel pressure again from within us or from outside to move through it as quickly as possible. And yet it is this incredibly valuable moment in time to reflect and heal and figure out what we want to do next, right? So it shouldn't be rushed. But we do. That's part of the resistance to change is that we kind of hurry through it in a way, right? Without really leaning into the beauty and opportunity of each of these phases and the necessity of them if we're going to do them well, right? So that's a big part of it, right? So we have to overcome this resistance to change. It's happening, and sometimes we can initiate it in a way that empowers us to make transformational change in our lives. So let's talk about these three phases in a little bit more depth, right? To understand better how to go through them. And so the first one is the ending, right? Which some people are always like, how does the ending start? But of course, if you think about it, it's logical, right? Whenever there's a change, right? Some set of circumstances are ending and you have a new set of circumstances starting. Same thing goes for the transition that you're going through in that change, right? That something ends or some things end, right? Could be the role that you're playing or roles that you play in your life or certain relationships, right, are changing or ending in some way, right? It could be that they're actually ending, right? You get a divorce. Of course, even in a divorce, like it's not that relationship ended, right? Or the relationships that are adjacent to it, right? Your in-laws, etc. It's that they're changing, that the circumstances have changed, right? The circumstances that existed before are done, and there are new circumstances. And now you have to go through a transition of adapting to those changing circumstances. And it's not always clean, right? It's not, sure you get a divorce and you were married one day and you're not married the next, but you go through a process of the relationship deteriorating maybe, and maybe even like mediation of whether and how to save it or to go through the divorce, and then either mediation or using lawyers often to figure out the terms of the separation maybe first and then a divorce. So there are these almost like little phases of the ending. It's like ending over time. And the circumstances are changing over time in some ways that it feels subtle in the moment maybe, and you look back and you realize they were bigger than you thought, or vice versa even. And so like we don't often see the change as like instantaneous and dramatic, though sometimes it can feel that way. And but there's a lot changing in relationship to it. And again, to stick with the divorce thing, like, or with marriage, right? Either side of that coin, like the relationships that are involved, it takes time for them to adapt and change themselves, and you're a part of that, but you don't have control over the other people. And so your transition can be a little bumpy here because it's not instantaneous, and these phases even of transition, from an ending to the limbo to the new beginning, that those lines are blurred most of the time. It's not like you wake up one day and go, "Oh, the ending is over. Now I'm in the limbo phase." Right? That's not the way it works. Often you look back and go, "Oh, that's when that kind of transitioned from one to the other." So, I think first acknowledging though that regardless of the bumpiness or the blurred lines or the kind of gradual way that these transitions work, something is or some things are ending in any of these changes, transitions, transformations, right? If it's a major transformation in who you are and who you're trying to become, personally, professionally, whatever, that the idea is that like there's a version of yourself in a way that is ending, right? It may be tied in even to like the core of your identity and who you are, right? I deal with clients all the time who are in their 30s and 40s and 50s even, and they kind of realize at some point that they've been living their lives the way other people expected them to, society, their parents, whoever. And they realize that they're not living in alignment with who they really want and need to be, their authentic selves, right? Their core values. And so they realize they need to make a transformation. They need to figure out how to go through a transformation personally, professionally, usually both, that will bring them more into alignment with who they feel like they're meant to be. And sometimes it takes that long, a decade or two or three into our adult lives to realize and have the courage to undergo that kind of transformation, right? And people are afraid to do it, and they're afraid to do it alone. That's one of the reasons why a life coach can be so incredibly powerful and helpful, is that a good coach can help you make the decision to go through a transformation of some kind and then help you navigate it and create that new version of yourself that feels so much better and so much more authentic and has so much more, possibilities of finding and creating joy and love and meaning and purpose in your life. So that ending though, there's complicated in a way processing that needs to happen. When something ends, there's almost certainly something to grieve, right? And a lot of times in the West, we're not great about grieving. We don't have a great relationship with death, right? We like to pretend it doesn't exist. We like to put it off, right? We're trying to avoid it. And as a result, grieving in general is something that often people don't know how to do because they're not taught well how to grieve by their parents, or their parents repressed their grief, whether it's when, someone died or there was a divorce or, a job change, somebody got fired, whatever. And so often as adults, we don't have that, those role models to rely on to show us how we grieve. But it's important. And sometimes we resist grieving, or we don't think we need to grieve because we're like, oh, I'm glad that thing ended. I'm glad that marriage ended. I'm glad that job ended. But even so, there are things about it, or circumstances or people that were involved, that probably you're going to miss, that you're going to have a sense of loss around, right? Even the job that you're like, oh my God, I hated my job, I hated my boss. Right, but there was something really good about having a job and having that paycheck, wasn't there? And if you don't have the new one to replace it, you might be grieving that feeling of security, right? Of knowing that you are going to get a paycheck every 2 weeks, right? And be able to pay your bills, and you have a sense of purpose when you wake up in the morning. Like, those are things to grieve. And there may have been people that you liked or loved at the office, right? And you're going to really miss. They became great friends, colleagues, right? So there are things to grieve, and we need to give ourselves some time and space and to acknowledge consciously that we're grieving for these things so we can move on. Otherwise, we carry that grief subconsciously with us. Right? And that can turn into a lot of different things. Like if you're getting married and you don't do the grieving for your single life, right? Or just getting into a committed relationship and grieving your single life, right? You may love this person that you're getting into this committed relationship with, and you may be so excited about spending more time with them or spending the rest of your life with them, hopefully. But it doesn't mean that there aren't things about being single and unattached that you're not going to miss. The freedom, the independence, time with your friends, right? Going on adventures, deciding what you're going to eat on Friday night without having to negotiate it. Whatever. Like, it's important to do that because otherwise, like, you kind of wake up 6 months into the relationship or the marriage and you're like, boy, I'm really angry at my partner. Why? And maybe eventually you realize that you're like resentful that you have to co-plan dinner or your, activities on the weekend with each other, right? And instead you've been harboring this resentment and just been more ornery and argumentative and but if you'd done the grieving 6 months ago, you would not be feeling that way probably. Right? You'd have come to peace with it and acknowledged it and maybe even talked about it in ways that you could manage it together and right? Maybe like Sunday morning is your time to hang out with your friends, whatever. So grieving is important. Even sometimes when we don't think there's anything to grieve, there's almost always something to grieve. And then there are things to celebrate, right? Whether it's some of the stuff that we're grieving and just to celebrate them, to not only feel sad about them ending, but to celebrate that they were a part of our life, the people, the experiences, right? That's awesome. We should celebrate those things, have deep gratitude for those things and those people, because that brings us joy. We may express it to other people, and that brings them some joy, maybe, and it's going to attract more of those things in the future. Our brains are going to be looking for more of those things, more of those kinds of people and experiences in the future. So gratitude and celebration of the good things that are coming to an end is also vital, really vital, right? So that we're not just focused on the sadness and the ending and the anger and whatever else might be going along that we have to, experience as well, but to make sure that we're celebrating and experiencing gratitude is so important. And then we need to think about the lessons learned. What are the lessons learned from whatever's ending? Any time in our lives, any relationship, any situation, any job is full of lessons that we can take away from it. But if we're just caught up in the emotional turmoil and the resistance to change or the sadness or whatever, then we miss out on this incredible opportunity to learn and grow, right? Our times of greatest growth in our lives is usually the result of some big change, some big loss, some crisis. So don't waste the opportunity to do a lot of great learning and reflecting on what you can learn from whatever is ending, right? And so that's part of what I try to, take people through is like, make sure you're doing these things. Make sure you're doing the grieving. Make sure you're doing the celebrating and the gratitude. Make sure you're figuring out what the lessons learned are. Because that's going to inform what you want to create next. And so make sure you've had that gratitude and celebration and make sure that you have learned the lessons from whatever's ending. So you can apply those lessons to creating whatever comes next and make sure that gratitude and celebration is looking to create more of that in the future, right? So that's so important. And then next, of course, is the limbo. And as I said earlier, that can be, the most challenging part for a lot of people because it's full of uncertainty. You're in between, right? Something's ended or it's kind of in the process of ending, but you're probably managing it to some extent. And the new thing hasn't quite begun yet. You may not even know what the new thing is or who the new thing is, right? If it's a relationship. So you could be in this limbo, and you might be in this limbo for a matter of days, or you could be in this limbo for months or years, right? I mean, but for the most part, these limbo phases tend to last maybe a few weeks, maybe a couple of months, right? Because at some point, something kind of fills in the gap. The universe abhors a void. Something's going to fill in the void, right? So you may not have a new relationship a couple of months after your previous one ended, but you've kind of created a new life or lifestyle for yourself probably by that point, or in the process of it. So you kind of got this new thing beginning, even if it's not a new relationship, right? But that limbo between relationships might last years, right? So the limbo just feels like so filled with uncertainty, and that gives us so much anxiety often. So we want to rush through it, right? Or we're just frustrated. We mask the discomfort and the fear of it by filling in the time with, like, doom scrolling on our phones, or you know trying to surround ourselves with lots of people and lots of activities and parties or whatever, because we're trying to avoid that sense of having to manage this limbo phase ourselves, right? And to figure out what's next. So our uncertainty, our fears, fear of failure, sometimes fear of success, right? Self-sabotage, procrastination, these can all manifest themselves during the limbo phase. It's very natural. It happens all the time. But we need to make sure that we are aware of that, and that we say, okay, let me actually pause here and use this limbo as a great time for reflection, for being more intentional, for self-care, right? Create some new routines, new habits right, if change is going on anyways, we're actually less resistant to other changes in our lives when we're undergoing a big change anyways. So take advantage of that. Create some new habits and routines. It may actually be much easier during the limbo, because we're already dealing with change, and so we tend to be more adaptable and flexible during that time. And get some help or support, right? Make sure that you're doing some things on your own that are really good during this limbo time, like journaling and meditation, to again make sure you're getting enough sleep and you're eating well and you're exercising, right? Good self-care things. Do those things and get some help and support, whether it's from a friend or loved ones when you need it, right? If you need a hug or need somebody to talk to, or a therapist or a life coach, right? I think personally, I found myself, and certainly with my clients, students when I was coaching them, that having a coach or a therapist during a big time of transition, change in your life, can help you turn it into a transformational change that can really dramatically change your life for the better. And so take advantage of that and get that kind of support you need. But certainly have a mindset that says, I'm okay with the discomfort. I'm okay with the uncertainty, right? I'm gonna help myself, do some self-soothing, do a lot of good self-care, ask for love and support from people around you, but do so that you can become more comfortable with the discomfort, with the uncertainty, right, that's going on. And then to adopt a real mindset of curiosity and mindfulness, right? That to really be present, again, a mindfulness practice, meditation, yoga, whatever, and a real mindset of curiosity, right? That I'm in the moment. I'm not time traveling too much to the past or the future. I'm trying to be really present. I'm trying to get in touch with how I feel, what I want out of life, who I am, who I'm trying to become, right? And so it's really grounded in this moment of the limbo, not rushing to get to the future that is uncertain, but rather being grounded in the now and being really curious about yourself, what makes you tick. Again, those lessons that you learned from the last thing that ended, right? Really being grounded in curiosity and mindfulness, because that's going to help you start to create some positive energy and feel good about moving forward, and even good about where you're at in this limbo, and to feel more like there are limitless possibilities moving forward. So let me be really curious about exploring them and exploring who I am and who I'm trying to become and what I want to take into this new phase in my life. And that can be really exciting, right? You don't have to have it all figured out, right? At all. But this is the time to do some of that figuring it out. But it really means first getting in touch with yourself and really grounding yourself in your core values, your beliefs, what you love, what you don't, right? What you like to do, what you don't like to do, all of that, so that you can move forward not only mindfully, but really with intentionality, right? Great intention about what I'm trying to create next without having all the answers, right? So take advantage of that limbo. And then there's the new beginning, right? And the new beginning, that feels daunting to some people. Oh my gosh, I got to figure out what I'm going to do next and what my life is going to be like and small steps, right? It's really about grounding yourself in that sense of who I am and who I'm trying to become, how I want to live my life, the person I'm trying to be, my best version of my authentic self. I want to have healthy, happy relationships. I want to be a good communicator, right? What are the things that you want? I want to have a job that has some meaning or purpose, or that allows me to feel, comfortable with my financial circumstances. And I'm going to have a budget, and I'm going to be thoughtful and mindful about how I manage my money. Like those kinds of things. And then what are some small steps I can start to take to create this new thing, right? Well, I can go on LinkedIn and I can start to network and ask for some informational interviews, or I can start dating and I can ask people out, or, right? I mean, whatever it is that are some small steps you can start to take, right? Maybe you're moving, right? And you're like, okay, so I'm going to start, apartment hunting or house hunting, right? Start online, right? Maybe I'll spend a half an hour every day. Small steps, right? And just short-term goals. This week, I'm going to try and accomplish this, right? That move you in the direction that you're trying to head, right? And trusting yourself, celebrate the little wins along the way, the little accomplishments, the little goals that you achieve, right? This is great. Oh my gosh, I had an informational interview today. That was fantastic, right? Great. Celebrate it, right? And then say, okay, so what's next? Well, tomorrow I'm going to send out some messages to some more people for that. Or, boy, I'm trying to, part of my transformation, I'm trying to be a healthier version of myself. Okay, this week, I'm going to move my body half an hour to an hour every day, no matter what, right? I'm going to take a walk for half an hour, or I'm going to do some yoga, or I'm going to get on the exercise bike or whatever. But I'm going to do something for half an hour just this week. See how that goes. See if I can start to create a new habit, right? Get an accountability partner, right? Maybe it's your coach, maybe it's your best friend. Check in on me every day. Make sure that I'm moving my body for a half an hour. Great. Small steps. And then celebrate them. I did a week of doing it. I went on a week of walks. That's awesome, right? Celebrate that. And then what's next week? Well, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to make sure that I drink 8 full glasses of water or 10 full glasses of water. I'm going to increase my water intake. Great. Set small, meaningful intentions and goals that are going to get you towards what you're trying to create, this new thing. And be very intentional about what you want that new thing to be like. Again, it doesn't have to have all the details. And the universe is going to throw stuff at you all the time that's going to disrupt whatever grandiose plans you had. But if you're focused on kind of the big picture of what are the intentions you have for this new phase, then that allows you to be adaptable and flexible along the way and still create the things that you really want to create in terms of experiences and the person that you want to be in this new phase of your life, while adapting to whatever is going on around you, right? And whatever is happening to you. And to do it with, a sense of calm, and again, being very mindful, and hopefully seeing this new phase as being full of opportunities, because it is. Every day is a chance to reinvent yourself, to reimagine yourself. So if you're in a time in your life where you want to make a transformation, then make it. Right? If you're going through a change or some kind of transition anyways, harness it to create the change you want in your life, personally, professionally, all the above. Right? Whatever. Take advantage of it. See that change is constantly happening around you and creates infinite possibilities. for what you can experience and what you can do in your life, even when you're feeling stuck, right? And start to just take advantage of it by making small little baby steps, one day at a time, in the direction that you want to head. And try to really tap into joy. Like, a lot of what I've been talking about is really about tapping into your integrity, right? It's who am I? What are my values? How do I live a life of integrity? Being the best version of my authentic self. Joy, right? Which obviously is important to me and the rest of us too. Like, it's not just where you're headed to create joy in the long run, right? From the transformation in your life, right? For getting through this transition, but creating little moments of joy along the way. And realizing when they're happening, right? Not being so stressed out and worried about what's ending or the limbo that we're in or the uncertainty of where we're headed, but to realize that every day there are these little moments of joy that we can be a part of or we can create, right? To choose joy every day. That can give us fuel. It can give us the fire. It can give us the energy to get through these transformations, right? To manage the transitions well, to have the energy and the confidence to and the motivation to make the changes, right? Joy along the way can help us do that. Even when you think about it, when you go to a funeral, right, which are these sad experiences, and yet there's often a lot of laughter. You can experience joy amidst terrible grief. That's a life lesson, right? That's a life lesson. So I hope this is helpful, right? The understanding these phases of transition and transformation and how we can use change that's happening to us to harness these transitions and do them well with intentionality, and to take advantage of them and turn them into something maybe that's even more transformational, right? There's power in that agency that you have to grow your circle of control, right? And feel a greater sense of self-direction in your life. Really powerful. So I'd like you to stop and just think for a moment, to reflect. Where are you right now? Are you in the midst of a transition or a transformation? Is there something ending? Or are you in the limbo? Or are you in the middle of a new beginning? Right? Or do you want to create a transformation? Are you feeling stuck? And you'd love to really shake things up. You're scared maybe, but deep down inside, you need to have a transformation. Where are you at? And then what's one small step you can take today to honor where you are in that process? Right? What's one thing you can do today to honor being in the ending phase? Maybe it's grieving or celebrating, right? Or the limbo, right? Working on your self-care, getting in touch with your core values, that sense of who you are and who you're trying to become, your authentic self, right? Or are you in the beginning? Right? And how can you make sure that you're creating that new thing with intentionality and integrity, right? And finding, regardless of where you're at, moments of joy. And if you're stuck, maybe get some help. Maybe go to integrityandjoy.com and sign up for a free discovery call. And we can talk about where you're at and how you could start to create some transformation in your life that could bring you a lot of joy and love, right? Let me know what the answers to those questions are. Send me a DM or a text, right? You can do that through wherever you got the podcast or on social media at Integrity and Joy on Instagram, TikTok, etc. Or go to integrityandjoy.com and fill in one of the forms there, to make contact. But let me know where you're at, what phase you're in, what you're learning from it. And if you post something about it on social media, tag me so I can cheer you on. And if you need some help, I'm here to help, and let's talk about how I can support you in your own personal transformation. Thank you for listening. I hope you'll share this episode with someone you care about who's either going through a significant life transition or transformation, or they're feeling stuck and maybe need to. And have them go to www.integrityandjoy.com for more information and to schedule a free initial consultation. Thanks again. I look forward to continuing the conversation. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for listening. If today's episode resonated with you, imagine what we could accomplish together in a one-to-one coaching session. Visit integrityandjoy.com to learn more and book your free consultation. Let's create the life you've been striving for.